So good day everyone and good day also to you, Mambeth. And now I am going to discuss about the assessment and intervention for infants and toddlers with disabilities. So the first topic I am going to discuss is about the early intervention for infants and toddlers with disabilities. So why intervene early? So why we need to intervene early the infants and the toddlers? So first, it is because intervening early can make all the difference in the world. So if we intervene early the infants and toddlers, there will be a many possibilities of changes and um, great help for the child, and that's why it can make all the difference in the world. And early intervention provides services and supports to promote the best possible developmental outcomes. So if the infants and toddlers might intervene early, they will provided by with services and supports na makahelp sa ilang developmental outcomes. And also, it enhances the family to meet their child's needs because of the supports and services na makatabang sa family ang kwan sad makamit sad ni sa child's needs. And early intervention can serve as a protective buffer against the multiple influences that may hinder their developmental progress. So there will be something to uh, protect against the multiple influences na makababag sa developmental progress sa child. And then benefits of early intervention. So there are a lot of benefits of early intervention. So first, it helps children with disabilities gains in cognitive, physical, language, and social skills. So there are lots of skills that develop in the first 3 years of the child's life. Some infants and toddlers meet developmental milestones more slowly than expected, and this is called a developmental delay. Early intervention can help infants and toddlers with delays catch up in their development. So makagain sila cognitive, physical, language, and social skills. Um, Cognitive skills like kuan, like skill listening no thinking like thinking learning and solving problems, and in physical skills like reaching, crawling, walking, drawing, and building, and language or communication skills like talking, listening, and understanding others, and in social skills like playing and interacting with others, and also the children constant maka-gain sad siya o self-help or adaptive skills like eating and dressing. And it benefits families also. It helps families manage the child and reduces stress because of the supports and services na mm, sa na ma-provide sa children during early intervention. Makatabang sad sila sa families na makamanage the child and maka-reduce the stress. Also, the benefits of early intervention, it benefits society. It reduces need for institutional placement. So, like, ma-minimize o ma-reduce ang pag-separate niya sa school from regular classroom, or ma-minimize ang possibility na ma-separate siya og class or ma-separate siya og school. And of course, it saves money because intervention is likely to be more effective and less costly when it is provided earlier in life rather than later. And next is the policies for infants and toddlers. Birth through age 2 are contained in Part C, or the early intervention for infants and toddlers with disabilities of IDEA 2004 to ensure the optimal development with or address of developmental delays. So there are policies for infants and toddlers birth through age 2. Now, contain siya in Part C under the IDEA. It is called the Early Intervention for Infants and Toddlers with Disabilities. The Congress rather established the Early Intervention Program, generally referred as Part C, in 1986, and most recently reauthorized the statute in 2004 in recognition of an urgent and substantial need to first to enhance the development of infants and toddlers with disabilities. Second is to reduce educational costs by minimizing the need for special education through early intervention. And third, to minimize the likelihood of institutionalization and maximize independent living and enhance the capacity of families to meet their child's needs. So what do early intervention services look like? So the family system is recognized as critical in the child's development. The teams must use an individualized family service plan or IFSP, which includes plans for the family as well as for the child. So in our sections, BSNED, we have a subject about IEP, right? And our teacher is Miss Tenerefe, and she also already discussed about individualized family service plan or IFSP. So we already have an idea about this. So ang kaning IFSP is an early intervention program to help with the needs of families with children from birth to age 3 who have disabilities. And the goal is to help prepare children to learn in school. So um, this plan defines goals and the types of services that will help the child and the family of the child. A child who qualifies may receive one or more of these services: the speech and language therapy, physical or occupational therapy, psychological services, home visits, medical, nursing, or nutrition services, hearing or audiology or vision services, social work services, transportation, and of course, assistive technology. So these are the services na ma-receive sa children during early intervention. And another topic is about the academic progress and assessment of children with special needs. So what is assessment? It involves collecting information about a student for the purpose of making decisions, and it is the process used to determine a child's specific learning strengths and needs to determine whether or not a child is eligible for special education services. So the assessment is very salient in order for that to determine a child's specific learning strengths and needs, and to determine whether a child is eligible for special education services. And the purpose of assessment is first, screening and identification. Second is eligibility and diagnosis. Third is IEP development and placement. Fourth is the instructional planning, and fifth is for the evaluation. So, ang kaning screening and identification, it is to uh, it is to screen children and identify those who may be experiencing delays or learning problems. And about the eligibility and diagnosis, it is to determine whether a child has a disability and um, if it is he or she is eligible for special education services, and to diagnose the specific nature of the student's problems or disability. And of course, the purpose of assessment is the IEP development and placement. It is to provide detailed information so that an individualized education program or IEP may be developed and appropriate decisions may be made about the child's educational placement. And instructional planning. It is to develop and plan instruction appropriate to the child's special needs. And of course, the purpose of assessment is for the evaluation. It is to evaluate the student progress. And the methods of assessment used in special education. Assessment can range from the formal to informal type. So informal or standardized. Example are the WISC or Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children, and the standard Binet, and the K-Math 3 diagnostic assessment. So the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children, the school psychologist usually administers this test, which measures a student's intelligence in a variety of areas, including linguistic and spatial intelligence. This is a norm-based test, meaning the student performance is measured against the performance of students at various grade levels. And also the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale. The school psychologist or special education team administers this test, which like the WISC, it is also norm reference. The questions are designed to help educators differentiate between students performing below grade level because of cognitive disabilities and those who do so for other reasons. And the K-Math 3 diagnostic assessment, it is an individually administered measure of essential mathematical concepts and skills. And another type of assessment is informal or teacher-made test. The observation, summative, rating scales, checklist, anecdotal records, and formative. So, observations and summative assessment. The goal of summative assessment is to evaluate student learning at the end of an instructional unit by comparing it against some standard or benchmark. So for example of summative assessment or midterm exam, final project, and senior recital. And then the rating skills. Rating skills are very popular and effective for performance assessment. Um, Rating scales state the criteria and provide 3 or 4 response selections to describe the quality or frequency of student work. Teachers can use rating scales to record observations, and students can use them as self-assessment tools. Ang kaning so, and then checklist the checklist contains a list of behaviors or specific steps which can be marked as present or absent, complete or incomplete, yes or no. In some cases, a teacher will use a checklist to observe the students. In other cases, students use checklists to ensure that they have completed all of the steps and considered all of the possibilities. And the formative assessment, the goal of formative assessment is to monitor students' learning to provide ongoing feedbacks that can be used by instructors to improve their teaching and by students to improve their learning. So for special education, special education students are required by law to have an IEP, right? So as an educator or so as a special educator, so when you administer formative assessment, you should be diligent about providing about providing special education students with their accommodations, so they have an equal opportunity to demonstrate their learning. Ang formative assessment connected na siya sa accommodations. So some accommodations you may need to provide based on the IEP are extended time to complete work or test, use of an electronic spell checker, having the test read aloud, and etc. So I will discuss later more about the accommodations. So testing versus assessment. Testing is the administration of specifically designed and often standardized educational and psychological measures of behavior, and it is a part of the assessment process, a piece of assessment process. And assessment encompasses many different methods of evaluation, one of which is using tests. So the differentiation between testing and assessment is part of this. The testing is part of assessment process, and it is a piece of assessment process, while the assessment encompasses many different methods of evaluation, and one of kanang different methods of assessment is tasting. So that is the differentiation about testing and assessment. So the role of the education professional in the special education process, you will work with many professionals from different fields. You are part of a team, often referred to as a multidisciplinary team. The team's role is crucial because it helps determine the extent and direction of a child's personal journey through the special education experience. So, as an special education teacher, your role is you will work with many professionals from different fields called multidisciplinary team. And your role is very important because it helps determine the extent and direction of a child's personal journey through the special education experience. And the assessment and federal law. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, or IDEA 2004, Public Law 108 up to 446 is the federal law that protects those in SPED. So there are federal law that will protect those in SPED. The Public Law 108 up to 446 under the IDEA 2004. And the IDEA lists 13 separate categories of disabilities under which children may be eligible for special education and related services. We already have an idea about 13 categories of disabilities under IDEA, right? So those kanang 13 categories of disabilities under the IDEA are eligible for special education and related services. And another topic is about the accommodations, modifications, and adaptations or programs, support, and services for children and learners with special needs. So accommodation, it changes how a student learns the material. So ma-change kung saan ang student maka-learn sa materials, and accommodations change in materials or procedures that enables the student to meaningfully access instructions and assessment. Assessment accommodations do not change the construct that is being measured, and accommodation is a change that helps a student overcome or work around the disability and do not reduce learning expectations. So, ang kani accommodation, this is the changes kung saan ang student maka-learn sa materials, and the changes also the procedures aron ang students maka-access sa instructions and assessments. And it is accommodations do not change the construct that is being measured and do not reduce learning expectations. So allowing a student who has trouble writing to give his answer or response orally is an example of accommodation. So if the student has trouble in writing, so giving him or her a permission to answer or respond orally is an example of accommodation. So here are a few examples. Teacher provides notes or outlines, allows typewritten work, allows printed work, provides a peer note taker, allows the use of whiter line paper for written tasks, provide highlighted text, allows the use of spell checker, and extended time on assignments, shortened assignments, and simplifications of directions. Also, test read aloud to student, verbal response, acceptable in lieu of written response, fewer multiple choice responses, 2 instead of 4. So instead of 4, 2 rang imong provide nga multiple choice responses, and multiple choice response instead of fill in the blank or short answer essay. So instead of fill in the blank or short answer essay, you will provide multiple choice response. And work banks provided for fill in the blank questions. So those are the examples of accommodations. And modification changes what a student is taught or expected to learn. So ang kaning modifications ay modified or i-change kung unsang itudlo or expected nga makatunan sa student. So modification, change in materials or procedures that enables a student to access instructions and assessment. Assessment modifications do change the construct that is being measured. Kung sa assessment do not change the construct that is being measured, some modifications do change the construct that is being measured. And ang i-change i-modified or i-change ang materials or procedures nga ang student maka-access sa instructions and assessment. Making an assignment easier so the student is not doing the same level of work as other student is an example of a modification. So if the other students um, medyo difficult ang level sa iyang assignment, so ang student with special need iyahang kan the level of her or his assignment is low compared to other students. So that is one of the example of modification. So another few examples of modification: reduction of homework, reduction of classroom. That just what like I've said earlier ago, and also omitting story problems, using specialized and alternative curricula written at lower level, simplified vocabulary and concepts, alternative reading books at independent reading level, tests are written at lower level of understanding, preview test also. So the difference between accommodation modifications in classroom instruction. So accommodation can help kids learn the same material as their peers. This allows them to meet the same expectations. And kids who are far behind their peers may need changes to the curriculum they're learning. These are called modifications. So, ang kaning accommodations can help kids learn the same materials as their peers. This allows them to meet the same expectations. For example, a student with dyslexia. For example, ang student with dyslexia might listen to an audio version of a book, but it's still the same book that the rest of the class is reading. Likewise, a student who has trouble focusing might get seated next to the teacher, but still has to do all the regular class assignments. And kids who are far behind their peers may need changes to the curriculum they are learning. These are called modifications. So for example, a student could be assigned shorter or easier reading assignments or homework that is different from the rest of the class. Kids who receive modifications are not expected to learn the same material as their classmates. And about standardized testing, the difference between accommodation and modification. Accommodation statewide tests allow some accommodations like extra time or taking a test on computer. It is best if these are the same accommodations a child uses to take class test. And some modification, some students take what is called an alternate assessment. This day test includes modifications to the regular test, and questions might be fewer or not cover the same material as the standard exams. Also, the results are interpreted differently. So, muna lang difference about standardized testing. And in classroom test, accommodations for testing can be different from those used for teaching. So for example, kanang using spell check might help a student with writing difficulties take notes during class. However, it wouldn't be appropriate during a weekly spelling test. At the same time, the student might benefit from having extra time to complete the spelling test or using a keyboard if the physical act of writing is difficult. So in modification about classroom test, modification and testing often mean that a student covers less material or material that is less complex. So, for example, a spelling test um, may require the class to study 20 words. However, a student with modification might only have to study 10 of them, or there might be two different lists of spelling words with a modification. What the student is tested on is different. And so here are some examples also about accommodation or modification. So Jack will have shorter writing assignments. Jack must write introductory paragraph while the rest of the class will write beginning, middle, and ending paragraph. So this example is modification because Jack will have shorter writing assignments lang. And then Jack's textbook will be based on the 8th grade curriculum requirements, but at his independent reading level or 4th grade. Jack will use the same content and have the same expectations as peers. This is accommodations because Jack textbook will be based on the 8th grade curriculum requirements. And Jack will use the same content and have the same expectation as peers. Jack will have test questions read to him when he asked. So that is also an example of accommodation. Jack will provide answers to essay type questions by speaking the answers rather than writing them down. So that is also an example of accommodation. So let's move on about adaptations or programs, support, and services. So example of support is special education. So by definition, special education is specially designed instructions, and IDEA defines that term as follows. Specially designed instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child. Under this part, the content, methodology, or delivery of instructions to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability and to ensure access of the child to the general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards within the jurisdiction of the public agency that apply to all children. And about related services support children's special education and are provided when necessary to help students benefit from special education. Thus, related services must be included in the treasured chest of accommodations and supports we're exploring. The definition begins in Related services in general, related services means transportation and such developmental, corrective, and other supportive services as are required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education and includes these are the examples of related services in the law: speech language pathology and audiology services, interpreting services, psychological services, physical and occupational therapy, recreation, including therapeutic recreation, early identification and assessment of disabilities in children, counseling services, including rehabilitation counseling, orientation and mobility services, medical services for diagnostic or evaluation purposes, school health services, and school nurse services, and social work services in school. So these are examples of related services in the law. So the supplementary aids and services, adaptive equipment such as special seat or cutout cup for drinking, assistive technology such as word processor, special software, or a communication system, and training for staff, students, and or parents, peer tutors, a one-on-one site, adaptive materials such as books on tape, large print or highlighted notes, and collaboration or consultation among staff, parents, and or other professionals. So that are the examples of supplementary aids and services. So that that's all. Thank you for listening.